Let's go ahead and turn to Malachi. This is going to be our last lesson from Malachi as we look at the last question that Israel asked God. And we're going to read this passage in which it's found in Malachi chapter 3, verse 13 through 15. And that's going to be our basis for this particular lesson, Malachi 3, 13 through 15. Your words have been hard against me, says the Lord. But you say, here's our question. Israel asked God, how have we spoken against you? You have said it is vain to serve God. What is the profit of our keeping his charge or of walking in mourning before the Lord of hosts? And now we call the arrogant blessed. Evildoers not only prosper, but they put God to the test and escape. That's our text this particular morning. Now we go back and we look at it. Our question: how have we spoken against you? How have we spoken against you? I think the bigger question is, rather than speaking against God, is acting against God. Have you ever heard the phrase, actions speak louder than words? Well, they're pretending to live a righteous life, and they're thinking that, hey, we're doing okay, we're trying to please God, so on and so forth, but in actuality, it's pretentious. In actuality, it's not right. In actuality, they've got it all wrong. Because you remember, as we've traveled through this book, some of the things that God has asked them. Let's go back and look at some of these things. He tells them that you have polluted my altar. He tells them that you have left me. He tells them, I wish that someone would shut the doors so that you can no longer worship God. He tells them, if we continue in chapter 3 or in chapter 2, that I do not accept your worship. He tells them in chapter 2, you have wearied me. They're pretending to be religious, but in actuality, they're not. And I think as we look at this particular text, our last of these questions, how have we spoken against you? I think that we see what is going on. That they're pretending to be religious, but in actuality, this is what God is seeing. How have we spoken against you? Your actions are how you've spoken against God. Your actions are saying that you are not really worshiping God. This is what God sees, as we've already looked at on the screen in verse 14. This is God sees the hypocrisy. God sees the hypocrisy in their lives. God sees how pretentious they're being. God sees right through the facade of their religious actions, right to their heart. But you have said, it is vain to serve God. What is the profit of our keeping his charge or of walking as in mourning before the Lord of hosts? God sees right through it. They're pretending to be religious. What's the profit of walking before God? What's the profit of you are not actually giving God your all? I wish that someone would come and shut the doors. You are wearying me. I have turned my back on you. I've left you. They're not right in the sight of God. They're pretending to be religious, but in actuality, they are desperately missing the mark. Yeah, several people that I've talked to throughout the years. Why don't you go to church anymore? I know that you're affiliated with the church. I know that you grew up going to church. Why'd you stop? Top 3 answers for sure. Hypocrisy. the hypocrisy in the church. I'm not talking about here, and I'm not talking about the Lord's church. I'm just talking about in general, hypocrisy. People can see right through hypocrisy, can't they? They can see through it from a mile away. And if we think for 1 second that God can't see it even clearer than people can, we are desperately mistaken. God sees it. Jesus saw it, right? Jesus saw the hypocrisy of man when he was here on this earth. You remember what he says here in Matthew chapter 23? Look at this. This particular text, beginning in verse 27, this is what he says to them, these Pharisees, the scribes and the Pharisees. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! There it is. For you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. This is exactly what's going on in the days of Malachi. Outwardly, they are appearing religious. Outwardly, they are pretending as if they are serving God. But inwardly, they are full of the disease of hypocrisy. And it's eating their relationship with God up. You cannot serve God pretentiously. God demands that we serve him wholeheartedly. Look at this. They outwardly appear righteous to others, to other people. They appear righteous. But don't forget, God sees them. God knows exactly what's in their hearts. Outwardly, like this tomb, what a beautiful piece of granite. I mean, isn't that gorgeous? It's absolutely beautiful. But don't forget, the granite is in the graveyard. Don't forget that underneath the granite is a dead person. Beautiful on the outside. Gaudy. Wow. But inside, it's full of death. This is their life. Outwardly, they appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy. Or what about this text? As Paul writes to Titus in chapter 1, essentially opening up this book, chapter 1 and verse 16. Look at what he says here. The very last verse in the chapter. They profess to know God, these unrighteous people that he is describing. They profess to know God, but they deny him by their works. They are detestable, disobedient, unfit for any good work. Hypocrisy, right? Look at it. They profess to know God. Yes, I am religious. Yes, I go to church. Yes, I am regularly sitting in the pew. But if we only sit in the pew, what good is that? Paul here to Timothy, he says, they profess to know God, but in actuality, they are detestable. They are disobedient. And it even says unfit, not worthy for any good work. It's pretty harsh. But I believe this is how God sees hypocrisy. Unfit for any good work. These people, going back to Malachi chapter 3, these people put on a facade. And they're serving God, and they're keeping his charge or walking in mourning before the Lord. But it's all just pretend. It's all for a show. Now, I know I'm talking to the cream of the crop. I understand that. Fully aware. But even we need to guard against hypocrisy. Because it's easy to fill a pew, but it's much harder to live the life God calls us to. Difficult to do. How have we spoken against you? You've spoken against me in your actions, but God sees your hypocrisy. God also sees the wickedness. Although we're pretending to be righteous and although we're pretending as if we are following God, we are walking in mourning, asking, God, come back. But God sees the wickedness. Look at verse 15 with me. And now look at what we're doing, Malachi says. And now we call the arrogant blessed. Evildoers not only prosper, but they put God to the test and they escape. They put God to the test and they escape. We are calling the arrogant blessed. Evildoers not only prosper, but they put God to the test and they escape. Now, we wouldn't, in the 21st century, we are so evolved in our thinking. We are so beyond all of this, aren't we? We would never call the arrogant blessed, would we? We would never envy or praise the arrogant person and thinking that, man, that is great. That is awesome. We wouldn't do that, would we? Yeah, probably we would, wouldn't we? I don't know how many of you watched football this afternoon. You talk about a bunch of arrogant men running around the field. That is it. 120 yards of arrogance. I make a touchdown or I make a tackle and whoa, look at me. And we grow up and we look at them and there it is. Man, I want to be like that guy. Look at him. He's got it figured out. We call the arrogant blessed. And not just that, look at this. The evildoers not only prosper, but they put God to the test. These evildoers, they prosper. And we've come in a society, we've come far beyond that. We only allow the righteous to prosper, right? Well, I wish that were the case. But it's been this way all through history. Far too often, the evildoers prosper physically, don't they? And we can look at them and we can envy, or we can look at them and put it in perspective. Because we look at the arrogant and the blessed, and let's take those two just for a minute. And we continue reading in Malachi. Let's skip verse 16, verse 17, and verse 18, and continue our journey into chapter 4 and look at chapter 4 and verse 1. For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the, arrogant and all, there it is, evildoers will be stubble. The day that is coming shall set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. We go back and we look at verse 15. It's the arrogant and the evildoers. And here in verse 1 of chapter 4, who is it? The arrogant and the evildoers. God will take care of it. It's not up to us. God is going to take care of these evildoers and these arrogant people. And he says they will be stubble. The day that is coming shall set them ablaze, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. Total fire, total destruction. Neither root nor branch. That's deep. That's severe. That's the punishment of God for the arrogant and for the evildoers. Those people that put themselves up on the pedestal rather than God. Those people that obey the will of Satan rather than the will of God. This is the outcome for them. Let's go back to verse 15 because we've got one more here. The arrogant, the evildoers, they not only prosper, but these are the testers. They put God to the test and they escape. How dare you? How dare you put God to the test? Now, if you remember last week, didn't God ask us, at the very least the Israelites, to put him to the test? And here he says, look at it. But they put God to the test and they escape. Obviously, there's a difference, isn't there, between putting God to the test and escaping punishment, and putting God to the test and in chapter 3 and verse 10, receiving his blessings. So what is the difference? Well, we go back and you look at verse 10 with me real quick. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts. If I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need. God issues the challenge. Put me to the test. And here they put God to the test without God asking. I think perhaps the biggest difference between the two, why one is justified and why one is condemned, is the action. One, they're putting God to the test. They're putting God to their test because of their disobedience. And they escape. And on the other end, they're putting God to the test because of their obedience. And they're watching God work. What's it going to be? Because there's two ways to test God. You can put God to the test and you can see how awesome he is and see how great he's going to work. Or you can put him to the test and say, God, you're not really alive. You're not really going to punish me. You're a loving God. I'm never going to see destruction. Which one's going to be? You can put God to test in a couple of different ways there. I'm reminded of the Israelites. When the Israelites put God to the test. Several times, right? Put God to the test several times. And a couple of times, God says, watch out, Moses, stand back and let me wipe them off the face of the planet. Let me take care of this. And this is one of those occasions in Numbers chapter 14. You remember in Numbers chapter 13, the Israelites, 12 men, were sent out to spy out the land of Canaan. We have finally arrived with the generation that left Egypt. They've escaped Pharaoh. They've seen the plagues. They've seen the Passover. They've seen the Red Sea. They have seen the parting. They've seen the quail. They've seen the water gushing from a rock. They've seen it all. And now they have arrived at the land of Canaan. This is the land that God has promised them. They send 12 men. And boy, oh boy, was it successful. They bring back, it always blows my mind. You remember that? Grapes that they carry, the cluster so big, size of pomegranates, that they carry it on a pole. Isn't that incredible? What a beautiful land. I mean, this is it. We have arrived. Of course, this is the promised land. 10 said, yeah, let's go get them. No, that's not right. 10 said, we can't do it. 2 said, of the 12, we can do it. 10 said, there's not a chance. And because of that, you remember Moses is forced to intercede for the people. What would the world think if they see you wipe off this people from the face of the planet? Then this is what God says in Numbers chapter 22. None of them, none of these people, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have, here it is, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers, and none of those who despise me shall see it. He equates this to despising the Lord, putting God to the test, despising the Lord, not putting God to the test and watching him work, knowing that he's going to take care of you. That's not it. Putting God to the test because of your disbelief and your disobedience. You have despised me. You've rejected me. And therefore, because they, as it says here, put God to the test, none of them shall see this land. Everyone, all these people, they've seen what I did in Egypt. They've seen all the signs in the wilderness. They will not enter. The arrogant and the blessed be burned like stubble. And God will take care of those who test him. How do we speak out against God? We speak out against God in our actions, because our actions speak so much louder than words. What are your actions saying? When the world looks in at you in your life, is it obvious that you're a Christian? Is it obvious that you are following after God, or are you speaking out against God? Are your actions saying that you don't believe, that you don't trust in him, that you don't really have hope? Speaking out against God does not, as we see here, necessarily have to be verbal. We can certainly say it with our actions. If your life is not in accordance to this, I would propose this, his word. If your life is not in accordance to this, I would propose that you in your life are speaking out against God. Don't walk in this way. Test God appropriately and watch him work. Watch him work in your life. Don't speak out against God. But if you are, he's here, and he's here to help, and he's here to forgive. If you need that forgiveness or encouragement or anything, come as we stand and sing.